excited to talk to you about selecting the right teams and vendors. When I open up a new market, that's always especially important to me as I build my teams. And as you look for turnkey providers in one of the many markets that are accessible to you, it's important for you to be able to ask the right questions and choosing the teams and working with the right vendors as you analyze properties, go through the due diligence period, decide what level of construction has been done to the property, and assess whether you like that or not. And then also interviewing the property managers to make sure that once you have purchased the property, that you're going to have a good process and a good experience. So that's what our webinar is tonight, and I think we're going to have some really good things. I see we already have some questions coming in. Best techniques for selecting an inspector. We're going to be looking at that tonight and talking about that. So that certainly shouldn't be a problem. And we see that we've got people on here that are experienced investors, have already bought and are looking at learning about new areas. So that's something that we can certainly address. So Timmy, whenever you're ready, we're happy to get started.
All right, let's go ahead and get started.
All right.
Alrighty, so our first presenter you've been hearing from is Jared Garfield. He's one of the top real estate investment, acquisition, and investment property trainers in the United States. Jared has also hosted a real estate investment radio show on Fox News Network for 3 years, and he's also a regular contributor on Think Realty magazine. Jared has also received many different certifications in the real estate and financial service industries, including the Graduate of Real Estate Institute. He's a certified residential specialist designations, and he's a licensed real estate broker in Alabama and Georgia. And here's a little bit about Adam, who is not on just yet, but we're hoping he's going to be able to join us tonight. Adam Whitmire is a third-generation investor and developer with over 18 years of real estate experience in operating a single-family and multi-family properties, land development, and new construction projects, with a strong focus on investment portfolio management and real estate market development. And Adam has also held licenses in real estate in Security Series 6, 26, 63, and 65. And he also has insurance licenses and is a former advisor representative for Transamerica Financial Advisors, LLC.
We really feel like we brought together a great team, and Timmy Horvath is very sharp, growing up with his dad, Tim Horvath, doing turnkey properties in Cleveland, and then rising to be the head over quality control for Real Wealth Network. Timmy has really learned an awful lot. He's worked in analysis. He's worked very hands-on with helping with turnkey properties in Cleveland, and has also done a great bit of behind-the-scenes work on analyzing and helping us find great deals in Huntsville, Birmingham, and Montgomery, as well as Atlanta. So we're really thankful for Timmy and all he brings to the table. So as we go over things tonight, what we're basically expecting to learn tonight is a little bit about selecting the right property provider. Who are you going to work with that's going to provide the property to you? Learning about the turnkey provider, what makes them tick, what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses, and how do you compensate for their weaknesses? Selecting the right property manager. Many turnkey providers will manage the property in-house. So what questions do you ask them? If they're keeping the property themselves and they're going to manage it for you, what questions do you ask the turnkey provider? Or if they outsource it, what are the important questions to choose to ask their chosen vendor? And then the third thing is, selecting vendors and making sure that we dig into the different types of vendors that you may want to have access to when you own property, to make sure that your property ownership experience is a good one. So first thing in selecting the right property provider, a lot of things have to do with your personality, your way of doing things. If you're an engineer or something like that, or an accountant or a CPA, you probably like great attention to detail. You're going to want somebody who's very anal at detail, very detail oriented, can answer very specific questions, not somebody who flies by the seat of their pants. You're going to want to make sure that there's good processes. If you're in sales, or if your personality is that you're, really outgoing and friendly, and, the details aren't quite as important to you, you might care more about somebody that's really easy to work with, that you really enjoy talking to, that teaches you and helps you to learn about real estate investing, and maybe their processes aren't quite as important to you, as long as they're good enough. But these types of things are things that you want to take into and make sure that you have your expectations managed up front, where you let the turnkey provider know what you're expecting. You need to let them know your goals. You need to be able to tell them, hey, I'm interested in an A-class property, or I like B-class properties, or I prefer new construction, new build to rent type of properties, and make sure that that turnkey provider can provide you the type of asset class that you want in the type of neighborhood that you want with the right demographics, income, crime levels. You want to ask all those types of things and find out if those properties are the type of properties that you're looking for. And you need to be able to explain what an A-class property is to you, and make sure that their A-class or their B-class meets your definition of A, B, or C class. So that's important. They need to know your goals. How much cash flow are you wanting per month per property? What type of appreciation are you expecting? So as you talk to your property provider about the goals that you have, they're going to be able to help you to understand whether their market and their type of properties are the desired types of properties with the right budget and profit margins that you're going to want in the investment process. The next thing you want to dig into with the property provider is kind of digging into their renovation. What are their systems? What are their standards? Are they doing carpet, or are they doing luxury vinyl plank? We find that unless you're in, B plus and better, a lot of times tenants will be very hard on carpet, and you may have to replace it after a year or 2 or 3, not the 6 or 8 or 10 that it should normally last. So you want to dig into the renovation standards. Is there granite or is it laminate countertops? What can you expect from it? What are the systems like? When do they replace hot water heaters? What are the ages of the roofs for a turnkey property? Fortunately, Real Wealth Network actually has the real standards that they put out, and so most of the turnkey providers already meet the minimum standards on their renovations. But you want to make sure that you're asking questions to make sure that one provider is apples to apples against another, that they're doing the same standard. It's important that with this, that you can minimize maintenance headaches. What you're trying to do by buying a turnkey property is not going to be a brand new property. A turnkey property does not mean that it's new. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. It doesn't mean you're not going to have some maintenance from time to time. First of all, tenants can cause damage to the property over time, and you should expect that the tenant will pay for those things, and make sure that your property manager holds them accountable, makes them pay for it if it's something that they did. But we want to minimize your headaches by buying turnkey, so that you're not having a lot of problems in the first year. That's the real goal here. The next thing when asking about a provider and making sure that you're choosing a good one, I want to make sure they put their money where their mouth is. If they're successful enough and they're selling 5 or 10 properties per month, they should be making enough money that they're investing in the same neighborhoods you're investing in. I would not want to find that I was buying C plus assets that someone called C plus, but that other people locally might call a D, only to find out that my the property provider, my turnkey provider, only buys B plus properties because they feel like they've had too much headache with C class. And so I want to know what type of properties they're buying. What does their personal portfolio look like? What is the vacancy rates on their personal portfolio that they own? And what kind of maintenance are they seeing on the properties that they own? And are they investing in the same neighborhoods that they're selling me in? Now, if they've diversified their portfolio and they're invested in some A neighborhoods, some B neighborhoods, and some C neighborhoods, that's great. That's fine. But make sure that you understand what type of properties they choose to invest in their neighborhoods. And I would even ask them, what neighborhoods have you had problems in? Look, a lot of turnkey providers will provide what the market wants. And if they have a lot of clients who want C or C minus because the returns on paper look outstanding, they may choose to provide turnkey properties in those markets. And that doesn't make them bad. It means that they're meeting the market of what people want, and they're giving people what they demand. But I want to ask those questions, because if they say, well, I do provide some properties over here in this part of town, and they are a lower price point at 70,000, but I don't buy there because I've had problems with managing tenants there. Well, that's something nice to know, but they're not going to volunteer that information, because for some new investors that are just starting out, that don't have very much to put down, they may buy a property like that has a Section 8 tenant that's stable, and that property might be a good entry point for somebody. But you need to ask these questions, because they'll usually answer them for you in a pretty straightforward manner. And so you just need to know those questions to ask. So that's important. So when we talk about the team that we have available right now in Atlanta, we have the Whitmire Group doing new construction with price points of 160 to 225,000. Typically, these properties have a rent point of between $1,200 and $1,600, and I've seen some of them even go up to the 1,700, 1,750 range. We're also doing stuff in Huntsville right now, and the Huntsville new construction price points are generally between 200, so they start a little bit higher and they go up to about 250, and the rents are $1,400 to $1,700 a month. And Huntsville's seen a lot of appreciation. Atlanta is also a very strong growth market. Charlotte, also very strong market. These are three of the hot markets in the country. They have strong job growth, strong population growth, and over the next decade, the Southeast is where properties are expected to really appreciate, where population is really moving. So this is three really good markets. And Charlotte has price points between 200 and 260, with rents starting a little bit higher, $1,500 to $1,800 in these neighborhoods. And so that's the team that we have. Real Wealth Network has a great deal of other markets also for you that you can do very well in. Now, selecting the right property manager. Once you've got a property, you've analyzed it, you know the numbers are really good, you've gone over the pro forma, you've checked the construction quality and the neighborhood quality. The next thing that you really have to do, I think during the due diligence period before you purchase, is to interview the property manager. There's some important questions to ask, but among them, how long have they been managing properties? Somebody may have bought a franchise a year ago, and if they've only been in the business for a year, they're not necessarily going to know all the ins and outs on how to deal with tricky tenants. And so I want to know how long they've been in property management, how many properties are they managing, what's their staff and how long has their staff been doing it? How many staff members do they have? Do you have one person that handles maintenance and another that handles rent collection and another one that handles maybe calling when they're late and collecting late fees? Do you have a maintenance manager that handles the maintenance on all the properties? How many leasing agents do you have? How much do you pay your leasing agents so that I know that the leasing agents are motivated? Some property managers will keep them on salary and they don't give them incentives when they lease properties. And to me, in my opinion, that's bad news. And then I like to know about their vacancy rates. What percentage of their properties are vacant at any given time? What's their eviction percentage? That should be low, like 1% to 2%. So what's their percentage of properties get evictions filed? What percentage of those get evicted? That's important to know. How long does the eviction process take? If that does end up having, and you want to make sure that you're in a landlord friendly state. And if you don't have the time to research all that, ask your property manager about whether it's a landlord state and why. What laws are there regarding evictions and versus percentages of rent that can be charged if it's late. Find out those types of questions to be able to decide whether a market is landlord friendly or prefers the tenants and is more favorable to them. I want to know what percentage of their rent is collected by the 5th or by the 10th. So that's important to me. So it's not just about vacancy, but what percentage of the rent have they collected by, say, the 10th of the month? That's important, and I'm looking for that number to usually be somewhere in the 88 to 92% that's collected by the 10th. And then you're always going to have 8 or 9% that kind of straggles in, and we're fine with those kind of people, because if they pay on the 15th but they pay a 10% late fee, that's great, because 10% times 12 ends up meaning that I end up getting basically a 13th month rent, a whole extra month of rent that year. So if they want to pay late every month, no problem, but I want to know how effective they are at getting it, and that's important to know. The next thing I want to do is collect a copy of their management agreement. I want to know what I'm obligated to, and I also want to know what kind of fees I'm going to pay. I want to know what's the minimum amount that I need to keep in escrow with them. Most property managers will have an amount that they want you to keep in their escrow account, $300 or $600. It's just so there's a slush fund if a toilet breaks in the middle of the night and a plumber has to be called, or lightning strikes, or a roof has a tree fall on it. They want to be able to fix those things to preserve your property, and they need to have some capital there. And so you need to know how much do they want in reserves, and also what's the maximum repair that they can do without your written approval. Usually that's around $350. I like it to be $350 or less. I don't want somebody doing a $1,500 repair, even if it's important, without them consulting with me and my being able to make sure that they got multiple bids and that we got a good person to do it at a discount potentially. Doing due diligence on property managers, it's a good idea to check with the Better Business Bureau and see what their rating is. You can check out the rip-off report. And one thing I find is don't take complete stock on the rip-off report or even Google reviews or Yelp reviews, because typically they're very polarized. The one or two people who, for whatever reason, got upset are going to go and they're just going to rip the property manager apart. And most of the people who have had great service aren't going to go to the trouble of going on and putting a good review. And so just because there's a few bad reviews, you want, if you find something that concerns you, talk to the property manager and say, hey, I found this. Can you give me a little bit more insight about your side of the story? And then in addition to that, you sometimes want to Google the actual personnel. I found a turnkey provider in one state that was doing a lot of property. I actually had them on a podcast with me one time. And then one of my listeners called and said, didn't you Google them before you had them on? They spent 7 years in a federal prison 20 years ago for racketeering or something like that. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. I didn't Google them just to have them on my podcast because they seem knowledgeable. I met them at a conference. So you want to make sure that you Google the company, find out about them, and also key personnel that you're going to be dealing with to make sure that they're good and upstanding. I think that's important. And understand too, with a lot of the reviews that you see on Google, there's a lot of people who go and look at a property and they get rejected and turned down, and then they get upset and they leave a bad review for the property manager. So it's not a real fair system, because a lot of the people that get evicted or they don't pay their rent or they're a problem tenant, when the property manager has to get them out, a lot of times they'll go and complain, and they were a terrible tenant who might have done damage to the owner's property. So you're going to see negative reviews on most property managers, I think. And so just take it in stride. Make sure there's positive reviews. You might want to get a copy of references of people that they manage that you can talk to 3 or 4 people and just ask them how their review, how they did for them and how well they've been pleased. And then the last thing is understanding how are they screening the tenants. What questions are they asking? Are they doing background checks, credit checks, previous landlord verification, and talking to previous landlords? Usually you want to talk to the last 3, because sometimes the immediate past landlord can't wait to get them out, and they'll say anything they can positively about the person just to get them out of their life, because they've been such a headache and damaged the property. So make sure you're checking a couple of landlords back and that they're doing employment verification as well. And I also want to know their policy about renters insurance. Renters insurance should be mandatory, and they should be listed on the policy so that if something happens, we want to make sure that the landlord goes ahead and make sure that the property manager makes sure that the tenant has renters insurance, which means if they cause damage to your property or it burns down when they fry okra and decide to go take a nap when they're frying okra, which we've actually had happen, that their insurance has to pay it instead of making your insurance pay it, making your rates go up, not go up, and theirs go up instead. Whew, that's a lot of stuff about property management. So next thing we're going to talk about is our property managers. In Atlanta, we have PMI Georgia for property management, and they do a really good job. They've been in business a very long time. They're investors. They own a lot of investment property themselves, and they cover pretty much the whole city. In addition to Atlanta, we have Huntsville. We have Weaver Holdings Property Management. I like Rod. He owns properties. He's been doing it a long time, has managed several hundred properties for me. Very prompt, very good service. We had a tenant that moved out of a property because they got a job in a different place. He kept the security deposit, had the place cleaned within like 48 hours, and had it re-rented for like $200 more than what the previous tenant was paying within a week of the tenant moving out. So it's just really good to maintain a good relationship with these property managers. Charlotte's our newest market, and we've got Bottom Line Property Management and also Tally Lane Property Management. So it gives you 2 options in that new market of Charlotte, which is really booming and growing. And one of the things I like with the property management is we like to make sure that if you have a problem and you're a month or 2 after you've purchased a property, and for some reason, if it's not renting, please call us. We want to be involved in the solution, because we can jump on the line with the property manager. And because we're a very important referral source, often up to half of their portfolio has come from us. then they tend to jump when we say jump, and they'll respond to us very well. So if you're not getting the results you want, then let's strategize together and possibly even do a joint phone call. So next, we'll talk about lenders. Once you've gotten through the property management vetting, and you've got a property under contract, and you're looking for vendors, you're going to need to work with appraisers, inspectors, lenders, and contractors through this process. So let's start with appraisers. So appraisers, you don't really get a lot of choice. So we can talk about selecting appraisers, but I could really put one bullet point on this whole slide and just say loan servicer, because of some of the fraud that happened with straw man type things back before 2007. Dodd-Frank changed a lot of things, and one of the things that it changed was loan servicers select a panel of appraisers, and they're randomly selected by a loan servicer that can't really communicate very much with the lender that you're using, or with the seller. So the seller isn't choosing the appraiser, and the buyer isn't choosing the appraiser. You could, if you were selling a property, you could reach out, and if you wanted to get an appraisal to get a feel for what your property might be worth before you listed it, you could certainly go through the Chamber of Commerce, or Google search appraisers, or talk to the Association of Realtors. They could certainly give you realtors, but you want to make sure that they're licensed in the state, and you also want to make sure that they're third party. That's important, that they're objective, that they weren't chosen anybody. And that was part of the point of the loan servicers having a panel that was independently selected. The other thing is real estate agents and stuff like that, and lenders can be a good source of referral from time to time. There are four main categories of appraisers: apprentice appraisers that will work under a certified general appraiser, licensed appraisers, and certified residential appraisers. So that as you step up in different areas, there's greater competencies, more continuing education. And if you're a certified general appraiser, a lot of the times you can do things besides just residential. You're also maybe training appraisers. And so you want to make sure that you understand, when you get the appraisal report, if it was a apprentice appraiser working, or a licensed appraiser with only a couple years experience working under a certified residential appraiser or under a general appraiser, I might, if I had a problem on a low appraisal, I might tend to appeal it if it was done by an apprentice or a licensed appraiser that didn't have a lot of experience. Or if they lived 3 hours away. We've seen this, where an appraisal comes in, they don't know the local area, and they're called in from 3 hours away, and then the appraisal isn't where it needs to be. So those are things to look at. And you want to make sure that they specialize in the local area that you're purchasing in. And you also probably want to know about the appeals process if there gets to be a problem. Selecting inspectors, and again, the inspector slide, we probably need to move in front of the appraisal slide, because usually what I recommend is make sure you get your home inspection done before you get the appraisal done, because there's no point in paying for the appraisal if you can't negotiate with the seller and make sure that the repairs they're doing are the things you want. I think it's important to go into the inspection thing when you're asking and interviewing inspectors. You want to know what certifications they have. Typically, the one that's the premier certification is from the American Society of Home Inspectors, which is ASHI, and also CABO, CABO is the second one. You're going to want them to have been at least certified through one of those two credentialing societies. When you find an inspector, it's important to find out how long they've been inspecting properties, what states they're licensed in. I like to know how many inspections they've done, or how many they average per month in the local market, and what's their career background. Sometimes you'll find a home inspector where they just went to a week-long course, passed the test, went and worked under under an inspector for 6 months or something like that, and now they're off on their own as a licensed home inspector. I find that if you can find one that has a career background where they were an electrician, or they owned an HVAC company, or they were a home builder, that a lot of times, or maybe a city inspector, those type of guys will usually be a little bit better and have better knowledge. And so I like to be able to get somebody that has some real background in the industry that's applicable to home inspecting. I would also make sure that I interviewed a couple. I would want to know, get a copy of one of their reports to say, could you send me a sample report that shows kind of the pictures you take? If you want to black out the address or something, that's fine, or the name of the property or whatever. But I just like to see how thorough your report is. How many pictures do you have? How detailed is it? How thorough is it? Are you inspecting everything from the roof to the electrical to the plumbing to the foundations to the crawl spaces? Are you doing a visual inspection on the roof from the ground, or are you actually climbing on the roof with your ladder? Those are the types of questions that are a good idea to ask. I'd be careful of boilerplate things. A lot of times they'll take one inspection from another property and they'll actually use it as a template and go through your property, and it'll have boilerplate things like roof is nearing end of life. If you're buying a great turnkey property and it says roof is nearing end of life, we've frequently seen that they'll say that about a roof that's got 8 or 10 years left. And if it's a 20-year roof and it has 8 to 10 years left, well, that's anywhere between 28 to 50% of the roof lifespan. And most sellers in a seller's market are not going to replace a roof if it has anywhere between 25 and 50% of the roof life left. But a lot of new investors will get scared when the boilerplate information says roof nearing end of life. So you want to jump on the phone with your home inspector and make sure they explain things and say, well, what does this section mean? How many years do you think? And a lot of times they won't put that in writing because it's a liability for them. But on the phone, they may say, well, I thought it was 3 to 5 years, or I thought it was 1. And there's a big difference. So make sure you're talking to your home inspector after you've read the home inspection and that they don't mind taking some time to answer your questions, that they're not just going to email it to you. So that's good. Selecting lenders. A lot of people just think, okay, well, I just need to go to a bank and a bank will give me a loan. Banks typically are less expensive. You can get a little bit lower interest rates sometimes. They'll often have lower closing costs, and that's the big thing. You aren't going to necessarily pay as many points with banks, but most banks lend locally, and then banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America, sometimes they're not really specialized in investment property loans, and they don't have the appraiser boards that they need. And that's why we like working with lenders and brokers that specialize in investment products. You'll pay a little bit more. I'm not against banks. Sometimes we connect our clients to local banks where you can get a little bit better return. But many times mortgage brokers do very, very well for us. We've used Graham Parham with Highlands a lot, and they really know investment loans, and they're doing so many loans for investors. That's all they do, that typically they tend to do a pretty good job with that product. But just know that you need to get quotes on how many points it's going to cost, what's their interest rate, do they have a process where you could possibly buy down the rate? You might be able to pay $1,000 and buy down a half a point, or $2,000 and maybe buy down a whole point, which over a 30-year period might make a big difference for you. Private lending can be a very good option. Also, companies like Lima One, if you want to do portfolio loans, you want to do cash out refis on your existing portfolio and then use that money to go buy properties. Or if you have more than 10 properties and you can't get the loans in your personal name anymore because they can't be insured by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, then private lending, usually you'll pay a percentage or 2 percentage points higher on the interest rate. So the leverage isn't quite as advantageous to you, but private lending can help you to get properties when your portfolio gets big, and they're a lot more flexible. Selecting contractors. Now, when you're buying a turnkey property, typically you're not going to have to select a lot of contractors, but as you own the property over a period of time, eventually you're going to need to have contractors. And a lot of times your property manager will go out and pull contractors for you. And generally the hope is that your property manager has great relationships because they give a lot of volume business to these contractors. So hopefully they can negotiate a much better rate than if you just went and Googled someone. However, it's always a good idea to make sure that any of the contractors that you allow on your property have general liability insurance, which would cover something if they did something to your property or damaged the property, and also workers' comp, which means if one of their roofers, heaven forbid, fell off the roof and got severely hurt, that their workers' comp insurance would cover the medical bills and cover disability and things like that for someone who got injured on the job at your property. So that's very important. So you want to make sure that they're licensed, that they're bonded. If they're bonded, if they do damage or they were to walk off the job and you had paid them money, potentially you could go after their bond and you'd have some restitution that could be made from the bond. So you want to make sure they're bonded in the city that they're working in and that they're insured. You always want to get references, get some referrals, get pictures of past jobs. Ask the property manager whether they've done jobs for them, how often have they done jobs, do they get complaints, is it done in a timely manner, is it done in a good workman quality. Those types of things are important to ask when seeking contractors. And you can get references from the contractor, but of course, the contractor is always going to have 2 or 3 people that he's done a great job for that love him for whatever reason. And that doesn't mean that they're great if you get 2 or 3, but always ask for those, because if somebody doesn't have any to give you, that's a red flag and you should probably choose someone differently. But I want references of realtors that they do regular work for, property managers that they do regular work for. And I'm going to ask those references the tough questions. Did they finish on time? Did they, how good of a quality was it? Those types of things are real important. So that's our webinar for tonight. We want to know that we're here to help you. We like to assist you in any way that we can. And we want this education to apply across all markets that you're investing in. We're not here just to do this so that you'll buy properties from us. We hope that if you see properties that we can help you with, that you like, if we have something that you're interested in, please call us. We'd love to help. But we hope that this helps you no matter what market you're investing in. And I don't know if Adam's on it. He hasn't been feeling well. And so he asked me to cover most everything tonight, but he might wish to say good night to you guys.
Yeah, I don't think Adam ever was able to join us tonight.
Okay. All right. Well, he's been really under the weather the last week, so we'll excuse him. But Adam's a great resource. You learned a lot about his background. Doyle White gives incredible customer service. We lured him away from running a printing plant. He was the head guy, ran the whole printing plant for years. Was a highly compensated executive. We've been very glad that he chose to have a second career with us. He's been with us for about 7 years now. One of the things that we do mention, I do have a coaching program. You can use that scanner thing and look at that, or go to that link there. That's a way that you can get a lot of real detailed advanced techniques and spend time with us and really learn a lot and get into a lot of great detail and depth. There's some real nice advantages there, and we provide that to people who are interested. So and we do have a discount code where you get it down to where it's practically nothing. So it's a nice way to really make sure that you're really getting everything you need to know to make the right purchase decision. So thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you being here. Timmy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nope, I think that pretty much covered it all. Yeah. And once again, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their evening.